This is Shifting Our Schools episode 106. Building a school culture starts with leadership.
And I think that does a couple different things. It allows you to create this wish list of things and really dream, but it also changes the mindset of the people that you work with too. Because if you're really approaching things from the perspective of why not, then you start to ask that all the time. And you start to ask, like, why can't I do graphing or analysis of voting with young fives?
Yeah.
Why not?
Listen up, educators. Are you looking to take your classroom to the next level? The technological shift in education is happening right now. If you're looking to integrate technology into your classroom, you're in the right place. Welcome to Shifting Our Schools with your host, Jeff Udick.
Well, welcome back to another episode of Shifting Our Schools and the first episode of the 2020 year. Happy New Year to you all, and I hope you had a wonderful winter break. Of course, here in Seattle, break gets over and the storms start rolling in. We've been dealing with 30-mile-an-hour winds over the past 48 hours as students have gone back to school this week. And the storms are supposed to pass in the next few days, just in time for us to get our first Arctic blast of the season here in the Pacific Northwest, which means there's now snow in the forecast. And I'm working with some school districts next week, and all of a sudden the emails are coming through that, well, in case of a snow day, so we're already preparing for our first snow here in the Northwest. But hope your new year is off to a great start. For those of you who have listened to our episodes last month, remember we were giving away Flipgrid stickers to those who left Flipgrid responses to our podcast questions every week. We put those names in a hat, and I'm excited to tell you that Teresa from Pennsylvania was our winner. Congratulations, Teresa. If you wouldn't mind filling out the contact form on the sospodcast.org website and send me your address, I'll get those stickers off to you in the next few weeks, along with those magnets. They're pretty cool. Appreciate you stopping by and leaving us a Flipgrid response. And once again, congratulations, Teresa. Now, we wanted to start 2020 off with a bang, so we're going to run this next giveaway starting with this episode and running until the end of February. So we're going to do 2 months for this prize because this prize is pretty cool. And we're giving away a Flipgrid pop-up tent to one lucky winner. So you have to kind of imagine this. You're going to have to listen in the podcast for the next 2 months. I'm going to be talking about this a lot. It's pretty cool. It's basically a tent that you set up in your classroom that kids can go and record in. It's actually a recording tent, but it folds up into a nice little packet. You can put it away and only get it out when you need it. I'm going to have a video of exactly what does it look like, and I'm not going to take it out of its case because I want it to be new for you. It's brand new. I got this from Flipgrid, and I want to give it away to some teacher or a coach that wants to use it with kids in your school. This thing is pretty cool. And so we're going to be doing this for the next 2 months. So for the month of January and February, anytime that you leave a Flipgrid response to one of our questions in our podcast over on our Flipgrid, you will be entered to win this really cool tent. And again, you can go over there and I'll have a video there for you that you can actually see what this thing looks like. It's pretty sweet. It's made for one student, can go in at a time. They can close it, record, do their little recording. The other cool thing I just found out, and I was looking at it, I hadn't got it out for a while. It's actually green color. So I'm wondering if it'll also act as almost like a green screen to do some green screen stuff in your classroom with something like WeVideo or another video project as well. It's pretty sweet. But you'll see more about that over at our Flipgrid. So how do you enter to win, you ask? Well, it's pretty simple. To enter your name to win, there are 2 really easy ways to do it. So first, you can head over to sospodcast.org. That's our website. And at the top, click on the link Flipgrid. That will take you to our Flipgrid topic where you can leave your answer to this episode or any of the episodes between now and the end of February. Every single time you leave a response to our questions, you're entered to win. So there's going to be something like 7 or 8 episodes, and you could be entered to win. Your name could be in the bucket 7 or 8 times. So that's all you have to do. Or if you don't want to do it through your computer, you can actually download the Flipgrid app to your phone. And when you enter the code, it'll ask for a code. Enter the code SOS podcast, and you'll be taken right to our grid where you can start up your camera and answer the questions from the podcast. So if you happen to be listening to us while you're running or you're driving and you finish your run for the day or you finish driving, grab your phone, leave us the response to the question right there as well. Also, we're always asking to see your classroom. Feel free to take us on a journey of your classroom or a day in your school. We love hearing from each other. We're trying to build a community here, and we all learn from each other. That's what this is all about. So each week we ask you a question based on that week's podcast, and all you have to do is give us your thoughts on the podcast and the questions, and you're entered to win. The more questions you answer, the more times your name goes into the pot to win this really cool Flipgrid pop-up tent for your classroom or school. This week's podcast, we talk about the importance of leadership in schools and leaders driving the mindset with teachers in their building. Such a great episode. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. So this week, here's our question. What do you do as a leader in your school, or that you have had leaders do, that help to set the right mindset for teachers in their school? One of the things we know is being a leader in a school is helping teachers have a mindset. And you're going to hear a lot about that in today's podcast. So that's our question this week. What do you do as a leader in your school, or that you have had leaders do, that help to set the right mindset for teachers in your school moving forward? And you're going to hear a lot in today's podcast about that. So head over to our website or to Flipgrid and leave your response after you listen to today's episode to our question and enter to win this really cool Flipgrid pop-up tent. This week, Chris Butler and I chat with Angel Mensing, an elementary school principal from Michigan, who is reopening a school and talks about the mindset she helps to develop with her teachers and supporting them in doing the work with students. A wonderful conversation with a talented and focused school leader. And with that, hope your new year is off to a great start, and on with the show. All right, welcome back to another episode of Shifting Our Schools. So excited to be joined once again with Chris, and we have Angel on the line this evening. So it's going to be a fantastic conversation. Chris, how are you doing? We'll get the Chris Butler update, which is how we usually start these podcasts these days. So
yeah, I'm doing well. 24 hours in the life of Chris Butler, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So yesterday, after school, I had a PD session set up for teachers, and we had a small group of about 4 or 5 teachers that had signed up originally. And it was all wrapped around the idea of using technology to gauge student learning, to see where they're at, use it for formative assessment, and to guide instruction from there and that sort of thing. So we were going to explore 3 different tools. Unfortunately, only had 1 teacher show up, but we've had this conversation before. One's better than none, right?
That's right. That's right.
One's better than none. And she was stoked. She was just loving all the things we were talking about. And she's like, I'm going to take this and use it tomorrow in class. And I'm just like, awesome. Fantastic. So got to do that. And then today spent time with one of the admin at the high school, working on our plan for, we have a PD, 3-day tech PD session set up for when we get back after holiday break. And so we were talking about that, and it's really cool because we kind of have the same mindset. The way that our district is right now, it feels like everything is kind of its own separate box. I'm really trying to streamline things. Like tech doesn't need to be a separate piece. Like all these things fit together. So we talked about how we could marry, if you will, the idea of our sheltered learning instructional walks with technology walks. How can those fit together? So we kind of worked on that plan a little bit. So it was good.
Very cool.
Productive day. Yeah.
Well, that's always good when it's a good day. Yeah.
Right.
All right. And we are joined this evening, because we are recording this at night, no matter what time you're listening to this. We're joined by Angel, who makes her home in Michigan. So this is fantastic. Angel, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah. Greetings from the mitten.
Yeah, from the mitten. I
love it.
Go ahead and, if you will, just kind of talk to the listeners a little bit about kind of your journey into education, how you got started, and kind of where you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been really fun to kind of think about that journey in education. And it is shocking to me to be able to say that it's about 2 decades long, which I don't know how that's possible, but it is. So, but I think one of the coolest things, one of the most vivid memories I have as a kid, and I remember I was in the 8th grade and I walked out of my bedroom and I said to my mom, I'm going to be a teacher. And she looked at me like, oh, okay. I came out of nowhere, like who waltzes out of the room and says that. But and so I have that clear memory of that. And I think about the reasons why that is such an important part of my life. And it's because other people poured into me in a way that I hope to be able to, do with my students and my staff and just basically anybody I, kind of run into in this awesome, profession. Seems like such a way to say it. Like it's so much more than that. Right. So,
sure.
And so, I think about that as far back as middle school and that being just a part of who I am and what I do. And in that 20 years, it has gone from high school teaching to, I opened an alternative ed high school with another teacher lots of years ago. And that was an awesome experience, to working with middle school kids, to working with elementary kids, to, being a classroom teacher, being an administrator. And just really kind of looking at all those pieces and how they fit into this awesome gig that we have that's, helping people grow to become the best versions of themselves, no matter what age they are, no matter what they need. So it's been pretty cool.
I love people who get that experience. I've always felt very honored as well of having an experience where at one point I did teach kindergarten, and I have so much respect for those teachers, but I've also taught high school, right? And I think there's this thing when you're in education, like there's a real opportunity when you, like your story, you've seen every grade level. At some point, you've been interacting with every grade level along the way, and the child development at all those different ages is so unique and different. And I find it very rare that you find. It seems very rare to me that there are educators who get to see the whole experience. Yeah. Right. Like you become a primary teacher and you're in primary teacher, or you're a middle school teacher. And so you only ever see kids at that kind of that stage. But when you have those experiences where you get to, like when I was a tech coach, I would one day be in 11th grade class and the next day be in a 2nd grade class. Yeah. And I remember going like, oh my gosh, look at this. Look at, the way that learning happens.
And didn't you find things in that 2nd grade class that helped the 11th grade class, and then like vice versa?
For sure.
Right?
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. It's so great. We'll talk a little bit about where you are now. So you're a principal of an elementary school.
I am. Yeah. So I am a principal at Niedermeyer Elementary, which is in northern Monroe County. So just a little further north than where I live. And it's a newly reopened elementary school. So the district, 12, 15 years ago, it was open and, dwindling enrollment, budget cuts, things like that. The superintendent at the time made the very courageous choice really to close the building down and kind of regroup students, if you will. The building got used in a couple of different ways after that, in terms of like an alternative ed and other programs for the district and things like that. So it wasn't completely, shut down and abandoned, so to speak, right, but used in different ways. And so just recently, our numbers have gone up, enrollment's gone up. And so the school was reopened, and really has been kind of an awesome experience to be a part of that process in a lot of different ways. So I get to work with little. So GSRP, I have GSRP and Head Start. So I have 4-year-olds in my building, wow, all the way up to 4th graders. And we have about 200 kids or so, which has just been an awesome number of kids to work with, and just a really great environment for those kids.
Cool.
Yeah, it's cool. So
go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was just going to ask, so you talked about the fact that you opened a school prior to this, or helped open a school prior to this. And I want to kind of dig into some specifics of the school that you're working in now, but what were some kind of common threads that were your thought processes back then to now?
Sure.
What were some?
Sure. Yeah. So the crazy part about this whole journey is that this is like the 3rd school that I have been connected to opening, she says in air quotes, right? Because originally the very first one was an alternative ed where we had a population of students that wasn't being serviced or that weren't being serviced. And myself and another teacher got together and we said, okay, these kids need something. We see this building over here that you're using 25% of. what if we do this? And we thought we were going to enroll 40 kids. And about 3 days before school started, we had 110.
Wow.
So it was mad dash.
Yeah.
And then at my previous district, before the one I'm at now, we did some reorganizing and kind of, opened a school, so to speak, or reorganized and started fresh in this new kind of structure, if you will. And the one I'm at now, obviously, there was an actual physical opening of the school as well. But the thing that has been the same, at least for me, in all of those instances, is really it's an awesome opportunity to be able to sort of dream and imagine, right? I think we as educators or as people, we can sometimes be really good at, if we could only do this, it would be perfect. If we just did that, if we only had, dreaming up all these things that are speed bumps in us flying straight through to the perfect environment.
Yeah.
And all three of these examples, we were able to sit down and sort of dream a little bit. And look at things from the perspective of like, okay, why not? No holds barred, money's don't consider any of that. Shoot for the sky. What would it be? And we were able to toss a bunch of stuff up there. And in some cases, we went for it and we did it. In other cases, we had to work a little bit harder, be a little bit more creative to reach those goals. But I think that in every single one of those instances, it really allowed us to kind of take away some of the excuses, and just say, what if?
Yeah,
what if we could do this? Why not? And let's find a way to do it. And I think that does a couple different things. It allows you to create this wish list of things and really dream, but it also changes the mindset of the people that you work with too. Because if you're really approaching things from the perspective of why not, then you start to ask that all the time. And you start to ask, like, why can't I do graphing or analysis of voting with young fives?
Yeah.
Why not?
I think that's so great because a lot of times educators, probably other people in other professions, but I don't know those. But we get stuck in this deficit mindset. Oh, I'd love to do this, but I can't because, right? So to kind of take those shackles off and say, no, let's shoot for the stars. Let's give this a shot and see what we can do. And if I were a teacher or an administrator or a coach in that environment, man, that's powerful. That gives you so much.
It's really exciting. It's really exciting. It's also kind of terrifying sometimes too, because when you take all that away, when you can't lean on we can't do that because you take all that away, it's like, oh my gosh. Okay.
When you take the excuses away, then you actually have to do it. Right?
Yeah.
That becomes the problem.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
I have a school district I'm working with. Last year, we had a group of teachers, and the term we kept using, and it came from the superintendent, was "you're unleashed." Like these 16 teachers were unleashed. You were not held to any testing. You were not held to any curriculum. You weren't held to anything. And I've never seen 16 of really good teachers so freaked out.
Yeah.
Because when you take away you can't complain about something now. You can't say, well, but I got to prepare them for this, or I got to do it that way, or I got to do it this way. When the superintendent stands in front of you, it's like, nope, you're done. Your job is to show us which way to go.
Yeah, cool.
Can you maybe dig into an example or two of how this has changed, or do you have like a concrete example of this, like shooting for the moon, and how that has impacted or what that looks like in your school or in a classroom?
Yeah. I mean, there are a couple things that come to mind in terms of like just some of the physical setup of things sometimes too, we think when people close their eyes and they think about what does school look like or what does a classroom look like, unfortunately, I think a lot of people flash right to that rows of desks facing the front, that quote unquote traditional setup.
Sure.
And things as simple as, here's your space, design it. What's your end goal? What do you want your kids to be able to say and do and think and feel and all of those things? Okay, so how do we set this environment up physically first to make sure that can happen? and toss some of that stuff out. Alternative seating comes to mind, and,
Right.
interactive boards and things like that, where, you really put the kids in a position to be able to kind of take charge of their learning too. It's a lot easier to have a group discussion when the seating is set up in a way where you're able to do that. You don't have to pick up a desk and turn it, move it, and all that. You can do that. Like, let's take that barrier away, right? Move what you have, make it work. But if you get to dream up the space and you get to dream up the physical setup of things, with your end goal in mind, awesome things happen, and you start to kind of think outside the box, for use of a cliche there. But and then, like I said just a minute ago about young fives, one of the coolest things I saw this year so far is this. I have a classroom full of young fives, right? So little people, but right around election day, my young fives teacher had the kids, took them through the entire voting process. Wow. So they lined up in the hallway and they checked in with the assistant to make sure they were registered voters. And then they went into the room, and there were, folders set up kind of like voting carols, and there was your ballot and you got to choose, and then you had to put it in the box. And then afterwards they went through and they graphed all the data. And then I listened to these wonderful little people analyze data. Tell me these kids can't do it. Yes, they can. And they told me why the cat was the best pet in their house. And they could not only tell me numbers and analyze that, but also why they thought, or why their classmates thought the way that they did, and they voted. And these 5-year-olds. So, I think if we look at what's our end goal, what do we want them to do, we set up the space for success, we ask the right questions, and then we get out of the way, amazing things happen. It's the coolest.
I love it.
So if a teacher, and I'm just trying to, so other administrators who are listening to this podcast kind of might be able to understand how this works. At your school, for example, if I'm a teacher and I want to do some alternative seating, and I want to get some bean bags, or I want to get some chairs that, are like they wobble a little bit, or they want to get like the yoga balls. Do I come to you as the principal and say, hey, I've got an idea. I want to take these 15 desks out of my room, and I want to get 2 standing desks, 4 beanbag chairs. And does a teacher come to you with a plan? Are you doing this as a school? Is it individual teachers? Like, just how's that breaking down to like the financial part into the classroom environment piece?
Yeah. So there's a couple pieces to that, because some of the design work for the building and classrooms and seating and things like that happened, prior to the start of the school year. So there's lots of planning that went into that, from the initial stages. And now that we're in it, right, where the kids are in the classrooms and we're living in it, and all of these, I thought it was going to work great that we did it this way, but now I want to change a little bit. I will say, so yes, they do, come to me and say, here's what I'm thinking. Here's what I want to do. How do we make this happen? The really cool part about my staff, that I could brag about them for lots of hours, because I have a really, really great crew who truly is in it for the kids, and will do whatever it is that needs to be done to make sure that kids have a great experience every single day. And so there's a lot of, just chatter about what they're doing in the classrooms, and I want to try this. And so what we end up seeing a lot of is, I want to try some standing desks, and I got this kiddo that needs to move. Right. And so here's what I'm thinking. And then the next thing you know, the teacher, 2 doors down or across the hallway is saying, oh, I got the perfect thing for you. Let me grab it. And it happens like that. I mean, it happens right now. We had a student at the beginning of the year who just really wanted his own office. And so a special desk brought in for him. There was one of our restorative practices coordinators was like, I have the perfect desk. He brings this desk in and sets it up complete with a printed out picture of a cat, like it was sitting on his desk, displayed for everybody to see. And it just it's this community approach to it, right? And so if somebody in the building doesn't have what they think they need in order to reach this goal, let's find a way to make that happen. Again, it's removing those barriers, right? It's taking away that, is diving into the why not. Like, let's find a way to make it happen. Because if you think it's going to make a difference for this kid, then let's do it. Because what if it does?
Right.
So here's my next question for you. And this is going to be, we'll see how this one goes. How do you find those teachers? Like, as a principal whose job it is to hire teachers with the mindset that you are looking for, what are the questions that you ask, or what is it that you're looking for in those teachers to have that, I don't know what you want to call it, passion, outlook, being able to view of education? What is it? How do you find those teachers for you?
Sure. I think it's a lot like I just said with the kids, like, you ask the right questions and then kind of get out of the way and see where it goes. But I think it's all about that mindset, right? So it's asking the questions like, no rules, no, it's that whole you're unleashed, right? Like, nothing's going to stop you in a perfect world. What does your classroom look like? And then go.
Do you ask that in interviews?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then what are you looking for in an answer?
Something I haven't heard before.
Okay. So you want some originality. You want to see that they've actually maybe thought about what my perfect classroom would look like.
Yeah. And have some ideas, beyond that. I want kids to collaborate and see that aha moment. Like, that's why we all got into education, right? Sure. To see that spark in those kids. But I think that just that you have a plan that's shooting towards that goal of these kids reaching their goals and learning things they've never learned before and considering things in a way that they never have. I mean, we're preparing kids. It sounds so cliche to say, but we're preparing kids for a world we don't even know what it looks like yet.
Right.
And so we really have to be imaginative thinkers and kind of outside the box, and sky's the limit. What do you do?
Yeah. Are there other questions that you ask like that? Like, I like that. I'm just wondering if you have, like, what are some, like just off the top of your head, do you have some go-to questions? Because I think one of the hardest things that I find when I'm talking with principals is trying to get to those type of questions where you can ask it, get out of the way, and see what those answers are. Because really what you're looking for is you're looking for a mindset. Right? Mm-hmm. You want a teacher with a growth mindset, a teacher who's willing to be part of a community. I mean, truly be part of a community. Yeah. And so just any questions like that I think would be really helpful, of things that kind of questions you ask along the way and during interviews or.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the coolest things is when you ask a question about what was your most successful lesson or most successful collaboration. You can see on their face, it changes, right? Because all of a sudden they're going to something that they know, something that was really successful, and you see what their thinking is and the connections they make and who they reach out to and how they problem solve. So I think it's always good to focus on that. I think another question that I like to kind of go to is, tell me about your most challenging student or the challenge that you overcame that you were proudest of, because you get to see how we problem solve, how we, maybe approach things in a different way, in a non-traditional way, I was up against this barrier and I didn't just stop there. I tried this way, and here's what came of that. So I think, I like those a lot, because then you get, a concrete example of something that they have lived. And you also get kind of a glimpse into a little bit of how the brain works.
Yeah. Cool.
That's really cool. So I love how you're talking about breaking down the barriers this whole time, right? Whether it's starting from the physical layout of classes and what it looks like, and the kids feel that. They feel it's a different feel than that quote unquote traditional classroom, and kids buy in, teachers buy in, and it just creates this culture, right? I mean, I'm sure you can talk about that. The culture of we're gonna try this thing out, and we're gonna learn together, and we're gonna grow together, and it's gonna be ugly at times, but and that's the reality of this type of education. It's really exciting. What type of technology do you have devices in kids' hands? Do you have?
So we do have devices in kids' hands. We're not one-to-one with this particular age group. I think some of the coolest ways that I've seen our kids utilizing technology, I mean, we have Chromebooks and they use those in a lot of different ways. And like I mentioned before, we have interactive video boards. That the really neat part is, I think people go to, teachers are using those. And most of the time when I come into the classroom, the kids are using them.
Yeah.
In a way to not only showcase their learning, but then explain it to their classmates too. And it's the coolest thing to watch them utilize the technology available to all of us, really, but they just go. And it's really neat because, again, you get to see that learning take place, and then the excitement and the empowerment of them explaining it to their classmates. And it kind of has this awesome domino effect throughout the classroom. So that's been really neat.
Well, and you work with little people, the young ones. Are you seeing how, is there talk with teachers, or are you even seeing this within your school of how technology is impacting the way that we have to restructure classrooms and restructure schools because of the new skill set that kids are coming with? For example, here, I was talking to some kindergarten teachers the other day, and they're starting to wrestle with having kids learn to write their ABCs before type, because so many kids are coming to school either on a phone or on an iPad or something like that, knowing where the letters are on a keyboard, but not knowing how to draw the letter. And I still want kids to know how to draw letters. I'm not saying that, but the kids are coming with an experience that they didn't come to school with literally 5 or 7 years ago.
Right.
And so what are those conversations you have? Like, are there other unique needs for this specific generation right now that you're seeing in your school that you guys are kind of playing with, wrestling with, or things that have just come out from teachers?
Yeah, absolutely. We're noticing that as well. I mean, your specific letter example is great because it really is, you hand a kid a device, especially a phone or a tablet. It's the thumb, right? The kids are doing everything with the thumbs. And the funny part about that is, that obviously that's a learned skill. Well, one of our math interventionists in our building started a typing club because she was proctoring one of our assessments, and the kids were struggling with a keyboard even because they're so used to doing everything on, a phone with their thumbs. So there's kind of that skill transfer. And then again, with the, physically writing sentences and physically writing their name, having to, they can identify the letter, they can identify the letter sound, but the actual, the physical writing of the letter A, we need to continue to work on that. So we are noticing things like that. And we're just trying to be really creative with how we do that, and sometimes utilizing, pen and paper to address that need, and sometimes utilizing the technology that's there and, tracing things on the board and, different things like that. So it's really interesting. It is interesting to look at this, generation, if you will, that's coming in with skills that, most of us as not digital natives learned as the years went by, and they're coming in with those. It's kind of an interesting shift in that the stuff that we sort of, take for granted or took for granted because that's what we grew up with is now the stuff that we need to teach.
Yeah. I had a first grade teacher I was talking to last week, and she actually up on her bulletin on her wall, she has, the ABCs like you would normally have them. But then at the end of the ABCs, she also has a big poster that is the ABCs of the keyboard.
Oh,
and even in first grade, she is getting kids to compare and contrast.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, she's like, some days we play scavenger hunt on the keyboard because this is not an ABC order. Like you don't say A, S, D, F, G, H, J, and so she's really starting, she's thinking about this. She's like, this is the keyboard. Cause even on your thumbs, this is the crazy part, even on it's core keyboard. Right.
Yep.
And so she's trying to figure out like, how do she help and support a generation that for better or for worse is going to need to know this alphabet as much as they know the ABC alphabet.
Right.
In fact, I would almost argue learning your alphabet on a keyboard is way more,
Yep.
I
More of a
don't know if I can say
transferable
this,
skill?
way more important. Because the reason why we had to learn it A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, that's the number that it is. But when you had to look up something in an encyclopedia or a dictionary, you needed to know alphabetical order.
Yeah.
Nobody's looking things up in an encyclopedia.
Yeah.
We don't
Yeah.
even buy encyclopedia. I can't find a
Right.
school that's still buying encyclopedias or buying dictionaries.
Right.
So being able to know, I mean, I want them to know, but I would almost be focusing more on where is this alphabet and how
Yeah.
does this alphabet impact my learning? I don't know. I can't believe I just said that out loud, but I
That's
put the words up on the back of my neck. You know, you have one of those moments where you're like, where's our focus for a generation, what they're going to
Right.
need for the future? I don't know.
Interesting.
I don't know. I just blew my own mind. I had not
Yeah.
thought about that before.
I know. Moment of silence here.
I know. I just-
Right?
Yeah.
So Angel, you talked about the group of kids that did the voting thing, which is super cool. 5-year-olds, you said?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Which is it's a form of project-based learning. And I know from some past conversations we've had, you're kind of passionate about the project-based learning thing. Is that a thing that's happening at your school a lot? Are teachers offering kids the opportunity to do some more authentic learning type things?
Yeah, we certainly are. I think the interesting part of the school that I'm in right now is obviously we just opened in September, so there are a lot of things that we had to sort of establish our procedures and routines
Sure,
and things like
As
that.
a school.
So I feel like, yeah, and so I feel like we're just starting to really have those good deep conversations about what is it that we want kids to learn, and then how
What does
can
it
we
look
get
like?
them to
Yeah.
that. And so we've really approached our 4th grade class has really been, we've really kind of leaned on them as the leaders in our school. And I believe really passionately in giving the students a voice, an active, participating role in the development of the school, especially right at the beginning. And so we're starting to have those conversations with our 4th graders. Here's a problem that we have. We just had the lawn hydro seeded. When we go out and it rains here in Michigan, there's mud all over the place.
Yeah.
How do we cut down on the mud in our school? What do we do? And really put them in a position to just identify some of the simple things. Well, if we walked from the sidewalk to the blacktop to the wood chips, then we'd avoid the mud. Perfect. How do we get everybody to do that?
Yeah.
And they're making posters that say sidewalk, blacktop, wood chips. Just things like that, that just authentic problems, if you will, or situations that they can solve that are right there in their school building that impact not only them, but the other kids. Like I said, we really talk to them about being leaders. And so it's really fun to go to them with something that our Head Start classes are trying to figure out. How do they, on days where they can't go outside, what do they do for recess? Okay, 4th graders, what could we have them do?
Yeah.
Well, they could go to the gym. Oh, but that's kind of during lunchtime, so maybe they can't because somebody's already in there. What do we do? So really giving them those authentic problems and saying, how do we make this happen? And the coolest things happen because they come up with ideas that maybe we didn't. But then they also, like the voting example, they also surprise us because they interact with each other in ways that most people would think, oh, they're in 4th grade, they don't know how to do that. Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
They do. Like, let's set up the environment for them to be able to do it and let them fly. And then, coach them along the way because they're, they're kids and humans, and, we're going to have, missteps or, mistakes or whatever, but that's such a vital part of the learning process too. So that's kind of where we've started so far at Niedermeyer, is just with the, what's an authentic problem we're facing and how we fix it.
Yeah.
Well, and a couple things really struck me when you were talking about that, giving the kids ownership. That's so powerful, right? Setting the environment up for them to be able to take that ownership and do that. I love the fact that you guys, when you were kind of thinking, okay, how do we want this to look? You did that, you asked yourself that question. What does learning look like? What is it going to be like here at the school? I think and it's great the fact that you reopened a school to be able to do that. But I think a lot of schools, especially as they're moving into a one-to-one model or something like that, could ask themselves this question: what does learning look like? And I think a lot of them don't go through that process, and it kind of hampers them a little bit.
Yeah, not only what does it look like, but what could it look like? Because I think sometimes we lock ourselves into what does it look like, and then again, we flash back to what it looked like when we were in school, and that's just not the way it has to be now.
Yeah, cool.
The way that it is sometimes, but it doesn't have to be that way. So, like, words matter, right? So what could it be? What do you want it to be? And then again, no holds barred. Like, tell me what you want it to be. Okay, let's find.
And if it isn't that way, if it isn't that way, what can we do and support you to make it that way?
Exactly.
Like, what support can I offer you? Can we offer you as a community so that learning looks the way it needs to look for your kids?
Yeah, and sometimes that's as simple as we just did this exercise a couple weeks ago. We stood up in front of the staff at our staff meeting really quickly at the end, like planted a seed, and then went, "Whoop, we gotta go."
Yeah.
And it was just, I want you to think about this, and don't answer me now, but answer me, before lunch. What's one thing that I can do for you today that's going to make today easier for you to, teach kids?
To do
you want to reach these goals and meet these goals with these kids. What's one thing that I can do? Like, if I need to come in and cover for 30 minutes so that you can talk to your colleague that you don't have common planning with because you guys want to do this really cool thing, done.
Yeah.
If you need 67 cotton balls because you need to do the science experiment, you don't have them right now, I'll be right back. I'm going to the store.
I'll run to Safeway for you. Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes it's just, it is about removing those barriers. Like, what's that one thing that's going to unlock it for you?
Yeah.
I'm here to do that.
Yeah. Cool. Servant leadership at its height. I love it. You talked a little bit about, and I just love that you just mentioned it once, but I can't get it off my mind. You were talking about, we're preparing a generation for a future that we don't know. In your school, or for you as a principal that is leading this school to prepare that generation for a future that we really don't have a lot of answers to on what it's going to look like. I mean, I think more of it's coming into clarity, but there's still a lot of unknowns out there. What's kind of your focus, or what are you looking at, or what are those skills that you feel like you want your students to have by the time they leave your elementary school?
So ultimately problem solving, right? Like, I think we just need to look at every situation as a problem. And unfortunately, problem sometimes has negative connotations, but it like, how do we attack that?
Right.
Don't tell me why you can't. Tell me why you can. Let's figure this out. Everything can be figured out. It might not be just with me. I might need some friends to help me figure it out. Right. Or I might just need to talk to my secretary about it, and she's going to say, "Oh, just call this person and this person," and then boom, we're done. Problem solved, you know?
Yeah.
And so I think it's critical for our kids to have those kind of collaboration skills, those conversation skills at the very least, to be able to really talk through that, to wonder about things. Like, we live in a world where we can figure just about anything out in mere seconds, right?
Yeah.
And so I think we need to foster and facilitate that wonder, and also encourage, like, hey, what do you wonder about that?
Yeah.
Sometimes we have to ask that question, right? Because they just don't wonder.
Yeah. And I think we're dealing with a generation that wonderment is at a whole different level than it was when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. Because when I was in 3rd and 4th grade, I wondered about something. I needed to know my ABCs and get an encyclopedia to maybe learn 2 paragraphs. Where this generation, I love this. Patrick Green and I were consulting together. He's a good friend of mine, another consultant. And the other day we were talking with a bunch of teachers, and all of a sudden he's like, we have to understand that we live in a world where facts are all around us in the air. Like, most of us, not everybody, but you live in a world where you literally can pick up your phone, or at my house, I just get to say, "Hey, Echo, what about X, Y, and Z?" And the facts are literally here.
Yeah.
So your wonderment can be at a level above the fact, because the fact's the easy part now. Like, I don't need to wonder why or how many legs does a spider have. That fact I can find. My wonderment might be, why did these ones live in the ground and why did those ones build webs? right?
Right.
And that's a wonderment that's higher
Yeah.
than just something you can ask in the air. And I think that to me is I love your idea of like, if all of my kids could leave our elementary school being critical problem solvers,
Mhm.
knowing that when they run up against a problem, there is some way around that problem. And you might have to ask others, and there's no shame in asking others to support you. There's no shame in giving it a go. And it's not, might not work the first time. You ask somebody else.
Yep.
Like that just whole mindset is a mindset that, to your point, I think no matter what the future holds, you'll be okay. Like if you have that type of mindset, you will find a way to survive. You will find a way to make a living. Whatever the future holds,
Right.
you will find a way to be a successful person,
Right. Well, and I think we have to model, I mean, we definitely have to model those skills for the kids, right? And so we as the, adults in the building are trying to solve problems. And in a lot of cases, and I've really focused on this a lot in the last probably month and a half to 2 months, is doing a lot of thinking out loud, and doing a lot of thinking out loud around kids too.
Yes.
So it's, oh, here we are trying to figure out this problem. I wonder what we could do. And it sounds a little, hokey at first, but they need to see and hear, like, this is how we attack these problems. This is how we collaborate with somebody else. I wonder if I tried this, how's it going to work? Oh,
Yeah.
And somebody says, nope, it's not going to work because X, Y, and Z, whatever. But just modeling that process for the kids too, where it's not necessarily, I have a question, I look it up, I write the answer
Write down
down,
the answer down. Yeah.
Right.
and then
Yeah.
check, moving
Yeah.
on,
Right.
compliance done. But it's the what's next, and we have to coach them through that process.
Yeah.
So that's been a really cool focus in the last little bit.
And I think if we get back to kind of a technology slant, which is, a lot of some of what these podcasts are about, I think that mindset as well for teachers is that I know teachers who won't try to do something with technology in front of their kids because they're afraid it won't work.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I cry, well, that's why you should do it. You should be able to go in front of your class and say, I don't know if this is going to work,
Yeah. No.
but we're going to give this a go. And you're going to watch me persevere through this really horrible thing of the internet going down in the middle of my lesson, or
Right.
whatever it happens to be. Right?
Yes.
Like you're going to see me persevere through that. But all too often, I feel like sometimes we as educators can shy away from doing that because, we want it to go well, but we want them to, or we want to seem like we know it all. I don't know what it is. Like they just want,
Yeah.
do you know what I'm saying? Like there's this, like not willing to dream big like that, right? To say
Right.
this is the way it should be. And I'm just going to teach this way and we're going to give it a go.
Well, and I think that kind of leans back on the, when we think about the traditional idea of teachers is they had all the information, right?
Yeah.
And we had to go in and sit down and learn it and write it down, be able to remember it and give it back on a test and
Right.
check, there we go, right? So the teacher had every piece of knowledge that we needed and all we had to do was just be there for it. And then, off we go. And I think that I don't know that that's the most functional way for education, right? We should be giving them the skills and kind of facilitating that learning and showing them the process, because there's no way we know it all as teachers, right? There's no way. You just said the facts are everywhere. They're in the air. They're floating around. Like that's a lot of stuff to have to know. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But
Right.
to be able to show the kids, okay, when I have this question, here's how I figure out, the answer or an answer, not necessarily the answer, right? So like, here's how I navigate that process. And I love what you just said about, kind of persevering through that stress in front of the class, because that's critical.
For
We
sure.
stand up there and we panic and we shut down and
Sure.
it's over, right? And so
Yeah.
we have to, help the kids see, oh, okay, I can figure this out. I can get through this. And the really cool thing that happens, that I've seen happen, not only with colleagues, but with students as well, is when something like that happens, when something freezes or the teacher's not sure where to go or whatever, there's somebody right there with, oh, try this. Oh,
Yeah.
try this.
Exactly.
And the learning that comes from that process is so cool, because then the person who has the suggestion is empowered to pass that on and teach somebody else. And then, the person that's receiving the suggestion now knows something new and can utilize it in a different way. And it's been really cool to see that happen too. Not only, like I said, from, students kind of supporting the teachers as,
Sure, right,
as
yeah.
the students
Yeah,
are digital natives, but then also like teachers supporting other teachers. This is how I get that information. Try doing it this way. So it's cool for the kids to see that too.
You mentioned a little bit that because you're reopening this school, you've had to spend a lot of this year on kind of building the school culture, which what does that look like for you as a leader of a school? What is that culture? Is it stuff in the hallways? Is it things you're doing at assemblies? Like, how are you, what is kind of the focus on that like school culture stuff that you're trying to bring in for kids as you kind of focus on that reopening this elementary school?
Right. So it's all of those things. I really, the end of last school year, as we're wrapping up, I brought all of my teachers a summer gift. And it was a bucket of stuff, for lack of a better way to describe it. But, we did The Power of a Positive Team by Gordon. So everybody got a copy of the book, some sunglasses, some snacks. Everybody has all these long reading lists over the summer that we want to do. And then,
Right.
And then summer gets the best of us. So I wanted to give everybody, all of the tools in order to tackle that. And we have focused a lot on bits and pieces from that book. But one of the things that rings true to me the most, just over and over and over again, is that culture is what you do every minute of every single day. And really what I have tried to do is just be in it. Like we are all in this. And I'm in a unique situation where my school staff is made up of teachers coming from our 3 other district elementaries, and then also the middle school as well. And so we have folks coming in from a minimum of 4 different buildings, unless you include those of us that came from outside the school district, and then it gets even larger, right? And so everybody kind of has their way of doing things, right? And so what we've really focused on is, what's the Niedermeyer way of doing things? How are we going to attack this? And in some cases, it's just happened organically.
Sure.
And in some cases, we were very deliberate about, how are we going to do this? What are we going to focus on? This procedure, this approach to things.
Yeah.
So that's been kind of cool to watch happen. And sometimes like I said, sometimes it happens organically and it's kind of, easy, for lack of a better way to describe it. And sometimes it's like, we've done this 6 different ways. What's the way we want to do it? Because we got to get it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right.
It reminds me, I had one of the schools I worked with had a new superintendent come in, and to your point, like I won't forget, like I was a teacher, tech coach, I think at the school. I was a tech coach at the school at the time and teacher. I taught 8th grade technology, but I'll never forget. He walked in and he was trying to establish a culture of innovation, and in a culture of innovation, you must be willing to fail, right? Like you've got to be willing to try it, give it a shot and see what happens. So at the beginning of the school year, every teacher got a blue piece of paper that you stuck on your bulletin board. And all it said was on it, every piece of paper said, "I failed today. You owe me a beer." Now we work in Shanghai. So we worked in Shanghai. Rules a little bit different than here in the US, but you could. And the goal was by the end of the year, you had to bring the piece of paper down to the superintendent and say, "I'm ready for me to turn this in." And you would go and have a beer with him. You would go out with the superintendent. You talk about what you tried, how it worked. And it was such a great way to just inspire innovation from everybody. And at the end of it, you get a one-on-one with the superintendent. And of course, he's asking you other questions about the culture of the school and what do you need? And can I run out and get you the cotton balls? Or if you'd have had 2 packs of cotton balls, would that have been better? Would the project have worked? And so he was getting all this feedback. But as a teacher, I was instantly put into a process of like, oh, he really means it. Like he's really meaning that he wants me to go out and try something, to the point where he's going to take me out for a drink.
Right.
And it was just, I'll never forget that, because as a staff, you were instantly into this, like he's in it with us. And he understands that if you're going to try something new, it's not going to be perfect. He's not going to be walking in and doing his evaluation and then, judging you because you were trying this crazy new thing that you saw or heard, or you were adjusting for your kiddos. And I've always remembered that as like, if I was ever a principal in my school, I was going to do the exact same thing. It'd be just like, here you go. Here's your get out of free jail card, but you got to use it. You've got to use it. You got to show me how you tried something new, innovative, crazy that failed. And by fail, we define fail as first attempt in learning.
Right.
Yep.
So it was just I think about that when you talk about you trying to remove barriers for your teachers, it always brings back what this superintendent did for us. So I thought that was kind of cool.
That's great.
Well, and I think it goes back to that modeling piece. Like, you have to be willing to do that too. And just recently, all of the elementary principals 2 weeks ago went to our state conference, which of course I sent a message to my teachers and I said, I'm going to apologize now. I have conference brain. I'm going to be rifling a bunch of questions at you. I've got a ton of ideas. Sorry. But and that's very much what happened. And I came back. And so one of my goals is to kind of tackle some like video announcements or video newsletters, meet people where they're at, right? We send out that weekly newsletter, and, you can look at the analytics, and sometimes people read it, sometimes people open it, and sometimes they don't. And so, how do we, in order to build that community and that culture that includes everything that happens in the building, but also the community around it. Like, how do we meet people right where they are so that they know our story, so that they know what we're doing? Because in the absence of that story, they flash back to what they did. And in some cases, what we did, 20, 25 years ago in school is great and solid, and we should still be doing it. In some cases, it's not. And so like, we need them to know. So I'm modeling video announcements and things like that, and they're awkward and clunky. And
of course. And I'm sure they love every single one of them.
Yeah,
absolutely. And,
they do.
And that's so powerful. Yeah. And that's so powerful as a teacher and as the students in there, to see my principal out there, like, trying and being awkward and uncomfortable.
I embrace the awkward. It's great.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I don't want to keep you too late, because I know it's a little bit later than 5:30 p.m. where you're at in Michigan.
A little bit.
But appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with Chris and I tonight on just the culture of your school, the way that you're looking at the things you want your students to leave your elementary school with. So I really appreciate taking time to chat with us this evening.
Yeah,
I appreciate it so much. Thanks for letting me learn from you guys.
Thanks.
Angel, it was great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Shifting Our Schools with your host, Jeff Udick. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit sospodcast.org, facebook.com/Jeff Udick, and on Twitter @JUdick. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on Shifting Our Schools.